this is going to be Jorge's case study analysis. So, the purpose of this case is to identify the needs of an aging individual with a disability while also understanding how aging caregivers, such as his mother, can better help prepare him for the future. Several key issues do stand out. Firstly, there is an unreliable caregiver support since his mother is his primary caregiver and her health is declining. There's also financial instabilities as they rely on limited income and his low wage job. And there are also safety concerns as his mother worries that Jorge may be getting taken advantage of due to his trusting nature. And finally, there's a gap in his end of life and future planning, meaning there's really no clear plan for Jorge's care when his mother is no longer able to support him. So, these recommendations that we're going to be given are followed by several key theories. Firstly, patient-centered planning, which means that Jorge is the center of all his decisions, which includes his preferences, routines, and values, and anything that would guide any plans about his future. Also, supported decision making, which focuses on helping Jorge make his own choices with guidance rather than taking that control away from him. And then we have community integration, which emphasizes the importance of Jorge being included in everyday community life instead of being just limited to his sheltered workshop that he works at. And then lastly, we have self-advocacy and autonomy, which highlights the importance of Jorge having a voice and as much independence as possible, which can really build his confidence and teach him key life skills.
Okay, so we're going to get into the assumptions that we made for this case. Jorge graduated in 1973, and before this time, many children with disabilities were denied access to education. Since he was in school, it's likely he was faced with segregation and didn't receive proper educational or developmental support. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 discouraged from social educational segregation and discrimination, and this likely allowed for him to get the job that he currently has. Jorge has been relatively protected by his mother and other community members. While this has been relatively stable, we wanted to explore options that could expand his work and social life. The briefing didn't say if he has any insurance, so we just assumed that he doesn't. Both him and his mother could sign up for Medicare, and we will talk about that later on in the presentation.
Okay, so for the findings for Jorge's case, we found that he is a 70-year-old man in good health who is mostly Spanish speaking with limited English. He is able to do some basic daily activities such as getting ready in the morning with guidance from his mom, but he has limited independent living skills, like he's not able to cook for himself or use public transportation independently. His primary caregiver is his elderly mom, whose health is declining. Although he has two brothers, they're not actively involved in his everyday care. So most of his daily support comes from his elderly mom. Jorge currently works in a workshop where he is comfortable and has friends there, but he has limited socialization outside of that environment. He does attend church on Sundays, so this is also another community connection that he has in his day-to-day life. You can change the slide, please. His mom also says that Jorge is very trusting and he might be easily taken advantage of. So she has anxiety about his safety when he is out within the community. Financially, the household mostly relies on his minimum wage job and his Social Security income checks. His mom does have a job, but it's a low source of income, and so the household mostly relies on Jorge's income. There's also no clear long-term or retirement plan in place, which could be problematic given his mom's declining health.
So to summarize what they said, our plan of care is to enhance the facility of care we desire to provide for Jorge by using a holistic approach covering from medical, social, financial, and occupational aspects, which we desire to address the root causes of Jorge's problem. We would encourage and direct our focus towards more conventional practice. Um, that means that we prioritize protection, rather than just venture out into new areas of potential discomfort for Jorge. And so some of the advantage of these approach would be it is highly personalized and it covers from most aspects of the concerns. Some of the disadvantage that we have for our approach would be this would be a time-consuming project, so which means it will take a great amount of effort for the interdisciplinary team to work together effectively and efficiently. Next, please. And we do offer an alternative solution, which is going to be fully conventional, highly focused, and targeted approach. And this approach would mostly rely on would primarily rely on the program, such as Medicare and similar government programs, which the advantage would be it does secure the necessity of living uh, from prevention and treatments for diseases, or if Jorge gets to the point that he needs supported living, that will be applied as well. It also secures stability and maximize protection. They can rapidly detect physical health decline if it appears. But however, there are limitations such as the lack of emotional support and the cure of quality of life. It does make Jorge might feel a little less personalized and a little rigid because it does go into the logistics and governmental stuff. So, next, please.
So for the recommendations for Jorge's case, we worked for a very interdisciplinary approach. So while we each have recommendations, they're going to take very focused approaches from the different lenses that we viewed Jorge's case. So to start off with, I had the lens of kind of like the interpreter. And as we know, language access is essential. So with Jorge being having limited English proficiency, that means that without a qualified Spanish interpreter, decision risks are being made around him rather than with him, which is undermining his person-centered planning and self-determination. The intersection of disability and language. So from a disabilities perspective, this creates an added layer of marginalization, reinforcing dependence and limiting autonomy for Jorge if every decision is being made and he's not fully informed on what his care process is and what exactly is being done. It's being made for him rather than with him, which leads us into the risk of reverting to the medical model. So without interpretation, providers may rely on family or assumptions, leading to a more paternalistic, deficit-focused approach rather than empowering Jorge in his own healthcare plan. So the clear action step that I proposed is a trained Spanish interpreter must be present at all planning meetings and service interactions starting immediately. This is so that Jorge understands everything that's going on with his care plan and that he has access to all the information. The case manager would be the one responsible for ensuring interpreter access in Spanish language material within the first 30 days. This is just so that it does not fall on Jorge to advocate for himself, given that he requires the assistance of interpreter. It should be something that's provided so he can get more comprehensive care. And why this matters, I've kind of already said it, but without language access, meaningful participation, informed decision making, and true self-determination are not possible.
Okay, so looking at the Jorge's case from the perspective of a caregiver, one recommendation would be to introduce supported decision making, which would allow him to actively participate in decisions about his life with guidance from either his caregiver or someone that he trusts, instead of someone coming in and making the decisions for him. This should be done using simple language and, as I said before, involve someone he trusts to help him better understand the decisions that he's making, as well as keeping open communication between the caregivers and the people that are actively working on his case. So practicing open communication would be important in this case to create a safe and supportive environment so that he is able to express his preferences as well as his needs in his case. Since he mostly speaks Spanish, communication should be done in Spanish so he feels mostly comfortable and is able to actively participate. These two recommendations can promote autonomy and self-advocacy. Another recommendation is to help Jorge develop independent living skills. He can already complete some basic daily tasks, but by helping him learn transportation and money management, as well as safety awareness, we could increase his independence and reduce the reliance he has on his mom. He could also benefit from expanding his social network beyond his workshop job and going to church on Sundays. So, connecting him to community programs or activities could help him reduce isolation in his everyday life as well as build natural supports. Another recommendation would be to practice person centered planning, and this is also important for his long term stability. Since there's currently no end of life plan in place and his mom's health is declining, it's important to begin planning now based on his preferences and needs in his everyday life. And this process should include his mom as well as his two brothers, if possible, to help him build long term support system for his future.
Okay, so I am the lawyer, and this is the legal recommendation. Jorge's current care model is built on segregated stability, which is inherently fragile. And to protect his future, we must move from a model of protection via isolation to protection via rights. The first recommendation I have as his legal representative is that Jorge must be transitioned from a sheltered workshop into competitive integrated employment with a dedicated employment specialist by the end of the next fiscal quarter. By replacing subminimum wage with a fair market pay, we address the economic opportunity gap and provide Jorge with this financial stability necessary to survive after his mother's passing. Crandall quotes, policies that allow subminimum wages are exploitative and discriminatory and often limit workers' ability to transition into competitive employment. Another recommendation that I have is that Jorge secures a home and community-based service waiver immediately to fund a live-in caregiver and long-term service supports. This will ensure that Jorge remains in his home rather than being placed in a state facility. Institutionalization is not a safety net, rather, it is a systematic violation of human rights. True care requires reparative justice, which demands that the government actually dismantles institutional systems in favor of community-based autonomy. Another quote from Minkowicz is success requires more than just physical placement. It must involve the creation of community support that promotes autonomy and participation in society. Legal recommendations for a primary implementation team. So I recommend a Medicare case manager. This is so Jorge can have initiation for HCBS waiver applications. I also recommend a vocational rehabilitation specialist to audit Jorge's skills and secure fair wage community placement, as well as starting the transition planning within 30 days to avoid any crisis-driven institutional placement.
All right, and so I take the role of the social worker. The first role of a social worker is to get to know the client as well as any other family members that are involved in their case. This allows me to get a better idea of what services exactly are needed to help Jorge live independently. It also helps me get a better idea of how to advocate for him and what exactly he wants from his life. Another role, and my first priority, we've talked about it a lot, is to help them navigate support services. Getting Jorge and his mother signed up for Medicaid would allow them to access transportation, Meals on Wheels, home health care, and translation services, which is essential. A direct support professional would help to relieve tasks that Jorge struggles to complete on his own. They typically help with daily tasks like personal hygiene, dressing, making meals, things like that. Additionally, social workers can provide counseling for their clients and their caregivers. As his mother is getting older, we need to consider the care that she needs and making sure that Jorge is aware, understands, and is included in that process of her care and her eventual passing. After she passes, it will be essential for him to have a support figure to navigate his emotions and his living transition to living on his own.
So my scope of practice would be occupational therapy. So as occupational therapist, we are always reminded that for elderly adults in general, their ability of taking care of themselves and performing daily tasks declines daily. And especially in Jorge's case, now that he is very dependent on his mother for the performance of his daily tasks. So our ultimate goal is to enhance and acquire the independence of him performing just simple daily tasks. So we basically broke it down into three different steps. So initially, we would like to assess of Jorge's current ability and seek for areas that Jorge may need additional facilitation. And then next, we would like to assist and acquire independence of these tasks. So basically, by repetitively provide guidance for Jorge and break them down into smaller steps. And lastly, we would like to transition into supervision. So basically, which means we would like to provide less and less assistance as time goes on and ensure that Jorge has gained the independence he needed. And within these three steps, we are gonna be it is gonna be personalized and modified. So based on Jorge's preference, right? Maybe during one of these practices of those routines, provide things like soft music or music of his like or TV shows. Um, Along with these practice and also follow his pace to enhance the maximum performance. Next, please.
So, from the primary care perspective, my main focus for Jorge would be planning ahead and increasing his support, especially since his mother's health is declining. And I would include a social worker to explore safe housing options like supported living or group homes. Then I would also recommend helping Jorge build more independence through life skills programs, which would teach him basic skills such as learning how to cook, use transportation, and manage basic daily tasks. I would also work on strengthening his support by connecting him with the disability service, with various disability services, case management, and advocacy groups. And then I would look at his work situation to see if there are better options that would be more engaging or independent, just beyond the sheltered workshop that he works at now. And then lastly, I would ensure that all of his services are in Spanish and to focus on his safety so that he's protected from exploitation. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. Here are a list of our references, and I hope you enjoyed.